In today's session, we will review what is data sharing within Snowflake, and data sharing's value proposition. What is data sharing? Organizations have been sharing data forever, either enterprise to enterprise, in which organizations share data with their partners in order to gain deeper insights and improve operational efficiencies, or within the enterprise or inter-enterprise, in which organizations share crucial insights by analyzing data that they share with each other. Organizations need data in order to collaborate. Across industries and organizations, data is becoming critical to business communication. There are a wide array of use cases for collaborating around data. These are just a sample of the use cases that customers have brought to us. For example, trucking companies need IoT data from partner to optimize fleet routing and also to make sure that their drivers are not exceeding the limits of their drive time. Another example would be in retail, as a retailer would want to share data with their logistics partners to optimize the supply chain and to make sure that the product is arriving at the right time for the right opportunity. Pros and cons of traditional data sharing methods. One method is email. The infrastructure is in place, it's very easy to use. However, there's a limit in the number of the size that you can attach to an email, therefore requiring you to deconstruct the data and/or zip it. Additionally, emails are not secure, requiring encryption and decryption on the receiver's end. Extract, transform, and load software, ETL. Large availability of well-established ETL software vendors. However, it's costly and complex to integrate target databases, which can take months to implement, requiring a very unique skill set. Additionally, it's built for a specific purpose from a source to a target database. Cloud storage. This area has grown tremendously in the last few years. There are numerous services available from large cloud service providers. However, it's less than optimal for performing when you're trying to perform queries, and you can't perform data manipulation and deeper analytics on top of that data. Application programming interfaces, or APIs. Numerous APIs available. Programmatic implementation relieves some of that manual effort through automation. However, the APIs process data in very small amounts, creating bottlenecks for large data volumes, and performance takes a hit, requiring high cost for higher bandwidth. Lastly, we have File Transfer Protocol, or FTP. This is a very well-known and long-established protocol. Many different software vendors and services available. However, it requires a lot of administration overhead in that you have to identify the client software, the server and/or services, and define all the appropriate privileges and access rights in order to access the site. Additionally, large data sets must be deconstructed and broken down in size in order to allow for quicker delivery of the data. So here's just some of the traditional data sharing methods. Data sharing was not invented by Snowflake, but what Snowflake can provide is very different. Data sharing in Snowflake. Here is the traditional data sharing Snowflake architecture. However, what we've added here are something called data providers and data consumers. And we'll get into what those are a little bit later. However, the big takeaway here to understand is that due to our architecture, the separation of storage and compute allows users, multiple users, to concurrently connect to the same data without having to move it. So this is live data access without contention or need to move the data. Additionally, our architecture allows you to resize compute instantly. So while you're analyzing data, you don't need to be concerned, has the data size increased at all? You simply need to query the data as you would any other database, run your analytics, and the virtual warehouses can handle that data size increase. Our architecture also has the centralized management of services, or the global services layer. This layer is the control tower. It directs all traffic, determines transaction consistency, maintains security and metadata. Through this global services layer, data consumers are able to connect directly to the data provider's data, all without having to add additional layers of security on top. It's already out of the box secure. So the big takeaways on this slide are that with our Snowflake architecture, data providers can share data with data consumers without having to move the data. The data is live, and there's no additional security that is required on top of our existing architecture. What is a share? A share is a named first-class Snowflake object that encapsulates all of the information required to share a database. A share is created by a data provider, and they configure all access. A share contains the privileges that grants access to the database, schema, and specific objects, and which data consumers have access to that share. New objects that are added to a share become immediately available to all data consumers once permissions are granted on those new objects to the share. Shares cannot span multiple databases. So if a data provider wants to share multiple databases, they need to create multiple shares. You can think of this in that a share and a database are one-to-one. Data sharing accounts. I've already mentioned a few of these, data providers and data consumers, but now we have this third account called a reader account. A data provider is a Snowflake account that creates shares and makes them available to other Snowflake accounts to consume. A data provider shares a database with one or more Snowflake accounts, grants the granular access controls to specific objects, and a data provider can create an unlimited number of shares and add an unlimited number of consumer accounts to a share. A data consumer is a Snowflake account that chooses to create a database from a share made available by a data provider. They access and query the objects in that database just like any other database in their account. Data consumers can consume an unlimited number of shares. However, as a data consumer, you can only create one database per share. I failed to mention, as a data provider, you pay for the storage of that data. As a data consumer, you have access to that data that was shared to you by that data provider. However, you only pay for your compute. Now, as a reader account, these are non-Snowflake accounts. They are 100% owned and configured by data providers. And the data provider pays for all storage and all compute for these reader accounts. These accounts provide a quick and easy way and cost-effective way to share data with a data consumer that doesn't have a Snowflake account. They just allow consumers to dip their toe in the water, if you will, of what Snowflake is all about. These types of account cannot write any data. However, they can export that data if they want to run analysis outside of the Snowflake system. Using data sharing. Simply create, configure, and connect. It's really that easy. On the slide, we have a very simple example of the minimum steps required to share and access shared data as a data provider and data consumer, respectively. On the left-hand side, as a data provider, we are running these scripts as account admin. Simply create an empty share, grant usage on the database, schema, and specific table. Then you simply alter the share and add the account that you want to share that data with. that account being the data consumer. And then instantly, as a data consumer, again, as account admin, you can see that share available to you. Go ahead and run a create database statement on top of that share. Switch over to that read-only database within a worksheet or SnowSQL, and instantly you can go ahead and query that data just like any other database in your account. It's really that simple. Okay, so let's talk about using data sharing. Secure views and user-defined functions. Secure objects, which are views and user-defined functions, enable you to dictate the level of granularity you wish to apply to your data while ensuring that the base tables and business logic are protected from exposure. So only secure views and secure UDFs can be shared in a shared database, not regular views or UDFs. By defining a view as secure or UDF as secure, the data consumer is not able to show the DDL or the logic of the function when they run a show views get DDL command in their worksheet. This eliminates the risk of unintentionally exposing table names, join criteria, or any sensitive data in the where clause of a view. Additionally, the internals of a secure view are not exposed in the query profile. So the drawback to this is that Snowflake bypasses the optimizations used for regular views and UDFs when executing queries with secure objects. So as a data provider, you need to make sure weigh the trade-offs between data privacy and security and query performance for data consumers. Snowflake's suggestion is that for larger tables, for optimal performance, it is recommended to define the clustering keys on the base tables for secure views. And the extremely large tables would be 1 terabyte in size or greater. Okay, so using data sharing, using secure views with access controls. So here we're going to provide a simple example of a secure view in which we create one object, one secure view, we add that secure view to the share, and that share is sent to 2 different data consumers. However, that one share object has different access controls that allows the data consumers to see different data. I know it's a lot of words. We'll go through a simple example here. Okay, so over here on the left, we are a data provider. Okay, we have a sales data table and an account map table. This account map table is called a mapping table. It simply tracks the rows from the sales data table or the base table and defines which accounts or consumers have access to each row. Okay, so it creates that mapping basically for that granular access control. Okay, that sales data table is your base table. Okay, so we're going to create a secure view. Over here on the left, you have a simple DDL statement in which you're selecting everything from that sales data table, joining to the account map table on that ID field, and where the account name is equal to current account. That current account is a context function in which the data, it resolves as the data consumer selects from the view. Okay? Then we simply grant select on shared data that secure view to our share sales. And then instantly, boom, the data consumers can see that view. Now it's important to note that the share has already been configured and the data consumers have already created a shared database from this share. Okay, so now let's move over to the data consumer side. I have 2 different data consumers. I have con1 and I have con2. Now, if con1 was to run select star from shared data, they would only see the first 2 rows of data. That's based on that ID field. Okay, so now let's move back to the account map table. And you see I have ID 100 is mapped to con1. Now, if I look up to the sales data base table, I see I have the first two rows as ID 100. And that's the relationship that exists. Now let's go back to the account map table again. Let's look at the second row. That ID is 200, and that's mapped to con2. And that relates to, looking back up to that sales data table, that relates back to the last two rows of data. Okay, so then going over to our data consumers once again, looking at con1, you see how that mapping is resolved. You see that that con1 only sees the first two rows of data. Now let's move down to con2. Con2 is going to run that same query selecting star from the secure view shared data, and look at what they see. They only see the last two rows of data. So what's happening here is that as the data consumer queries that data, that current account context function is resolving on runtime. And they're only seeing what rows as a data provider we define for them. This is a very, very, very impressive tool that we have. Basically, rather than having to create multiple views for each of these data consumers, we create one, create this mapping table, and boom, we're able to secure the data with the access controls. Just think if you have 50 data consumers and you needed to create 50 views. Well, with this, you don't have to do that. You just have to maintain that mapping table. And some of our clients, what they do for that mapping table is they automate the process in order to populate that. So as new consumers' accounts log in and create access to the application, a row is populated in that mapping table, and it's automatically defined rather than manually maintaining it. So there's various ways that you can go about maintaining that mapping table. But for the initial setup here, and granted this is a very, very simple example, I went ahead and manually populated that just to illustrate this. Okay, considerations and usage for shared databases, or excuse me, for shares. So as a data provider, you must be account admin or have the role create shares global privilege. I'm sorry, have a role granted the create shares global privilege. Consumer accounts must be in the same Snowflake region as your account. Each share contains a single database, and all other objects included in that share must be from the same database. So again, you cannot share, a share cannot span multiple databases. For data and security reasons, only secure views and secure UDFs are supported in shares at this time, not non-secure views or UDFs. New or modified data and tables in shares are immediately available to all consumers who have created a database from that share. So there's no test, as a data provider, there's no testing data within your own environment and then sending it to the data consumers. They're going to see it immediately, assuming that that table is included in the share and they have access to it. You must grant usage on new objects created in a database in a share in order for them to be available. So just because you grant usage on a specific database and you create a new table in that database does not make it immediately available to the data consumers. You need to go ahead and grant that specific access. Objects that are dropped from a shared database and then recreated with the same name are not going to be immediately available in the share to that data consumer. You're going to go ahead and grant, if you want to share that object, you're going to have to go ahead and grant usage on that object to make them available. Considerations and usage for shared databases. So as a data consumer, again, you must use account admin role or use a role that has the import shares global privilege to administer the shares. Shares can only be consumed once per account. Shared databases are read-only, and you cannot reshare a share. So you cannot forward a share and become a data provider to another data consumer. Actions that are currently not supported is creating a clone of a shared database or any schema tables in that database, time travel for shared databases, and editing the comments for a shared database. Data sharing value proposition. Very importantly, Snowflake is focused solely on providing a technology platform for data sharing that gives customers full control of their data, customer relationships, and business model. Snowflake is not the middleman between data providers and data consumers. Snowflake provides the technology, and the data providers determine the business model and relationships with their customers. Additionally, there is no additional charges for data sharing. In fact, it reduces the cost of sharing data because Snowflake's approach is that data consumers don't need to pay for the storing their shared data. The data provider pays for that, remember? And data providers do not incur costs for compute used by data consumers to run queries on that shared data, as the data consumer pays for that. Data sharing opportunities. Snowflake data sharing enables companies to transform how they create business assets from their data. Organizations can monetize your data as an asset. A data provider sells a product and generates revenue that is built around sharing data. Improve product and services. Data sharing is a value-added feature of many organizations which collect data on behalf of customers. Drive efficiencies. Scenarios where data is shared among business partners in order to optimize processes and interactions. Enable insights across silos. Large organizations have data silos for a variety of reasons, for example, acquisitions. Such organizations can benefit from using Snowflake data sharing across these silos. That concludes this session on data sharing. Thank you very much for your time.